To Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Alasdair Gunn, who is a frequent guest on my show, and he and I were covering both in different ways the youth gender transition mania that is still ongoing but had peaked for us and our interests a couple of years ago. And we have a lot of connections to that community, you know, people pushing back against child gender transition specifically, and then the gender cult more broadly. So this is kind of a niche conversation for those of you who have been following along and people who are interested in how Alasdair is doing, because he has been so impactful to so many lives, and I find him to be a great guy. Anyways, and then we kind of swerve off into trying to check how based either one of us is comparatively. And so things kind of go beyond cancer into right-wing positionality and the current liberal / post-liberal moment that we're in right now. Without further ado, here's Alasdair Gunn. Do gay men, I know you guys kind of have like butch and femme kind of like distinctions, but does one gay man end up like spending exorbitant amount of time in the bathroom, or is that just a heterosexual or a female?
Well, I'm not sure. It's a very small sample set because you're asking a sample set of two people, both of whom are fundamentally quite lazy. Not in our
You don't want to
case.
speak on behalf of the gay community about your...
I mean, I guess like you could analyze the amount of crap we have, like bathroom crap, like oils and just stuff you really don't need, and that's probably mainly Mark, actually, unless you're counting like colostomy stuff, because I have the whole drawer.
Still?
Yeah, still, it might be for life.
Yeah.
It sort of depends, really. I'm going to meet the surgeon. My vibe is that he doesn't want to do it, and I'm just going into hospital to have him explain to me why he won't do it.
Do what? Like fix the plumbing?
Reverse
make it functional?
Yeah, reverse it.
Yeah.
Because it is medically unnecessary. And it's not just about whether it's medically necessary, it's about whether they can do it. So he might explain to me that they can't, or I don't know, whatever. I don't really care. It's fine.
You've adapted.
I mean, I've got I might have arthritis or I might not. It's not really clear. I've got arthralgia, which is like symptoms of arthritis. It's basically just Greek for bone pain. They just get paid money to translate stuff into Greek. And I shouldn't say that at all. And that might turn into arthritis, but it probably won't. But I don't really care. Like, who cares? Do you know? Genuinely, it looks so small from this point of view.
Yeah. A little bit of background pain is actually a sign of life that you embrace.
Well, I've got it, whatever. Like, it's all extra time now. I nearly died twice, so you can't really you can't really complain.
Yeah.
It's quite a difficult... I have a friend who had a terrible accident 40 years before I met her. Terrible accident. I don't want to say too much about it. It's absolutely terrible. She's very proud, and it left her with a number of... It nearly killed her. It's a miracle that she wouldn't mind me saying what it was. An entire horse fell on her. A horse landed on her body, and it's a miracle that she survived. And she, the priest was called and everything, and then she came round, and then they said, okay, you're going to be paralyzed for the rest of your life, and you're probably not going to live that long. And 40 years later, here she is. And we had a conversation where she said, we just started talking, and she sort of said, I've not really ever had a friend I can say who gets it, because she was in hospital for 6 months, and she had to prepare her mind for what she was being told was like a near certainty. And then after that, you're like, oh, who cares about having arthritis? Like, seriously, like, it's just going to slow you down. There's no point moaning about it. And it's funny now because now I understand her, because she's a very strange person. She's a wonderful person. She's a very unusual person. She has absolutely zero tolerance for complaining, in the sense that if you start to complain, she will literally walk up and leave. And I've seen her, she's a very sociable person. She'll host like dinners and stuff. And if people start fighting or complaining or being negative, she just walks up and leaves. And you see her in the garden and she'll be like mucking out a stable because she's a country woman. She'll just go and do that for 5 minutes because she's got no tolerance for complaining. And
Ingratitude.
I understand her a lot. Yeah. I don't think it's that I'm automatically going to turn into that person, but I understand where it comes from a lot more now. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, I've probably got arthritis. It's probably only in my hip, but at the minute I've got arthralgia, which is like I have the hand strength of a 90-year-old woman. I can't even pull the tank out of the coffee machine. I'm like,
oh, okay.
Which is really pathetic.
You got to do exercises or something to get that.
It'll either come back or it won't. It's probably just a side effect of immunotherapy, but it seems that there's some from my PET scan. There's some swelling in my hip, which suggests that might be something a bit more permanent.
You were kind of a guinea pig, or not quite. I mean, it's still kind of experimental therapy that you received?
Yeah, so I got it on compassionate grounds and I got it off label. So meaning for a different purpose than that which it's designed. But that's a bit of a technicality. The purpose for which it's designed was as part of a clinical trial, which is still ongoing. And then most people in the world who've had it have had it for the same purpose, in the sense of to try and get rid of cancer, or at least in most cases it doesn't, but it gives you more time. And then like you're sort of off label, you're signing away certain rights because it is experimental. So there's a 10% chance it can give you diabetes. And for those who are eligible, the chances of this good an outcome, as I understand it, for my cancer, which is not mean anything about anyone else's because I don't know, like in terms of different parts of the body and whatnot, it was about 8%. So it was this was less likely to happen than me just getting diabetes.
Diabetes is
actually
rather manageable at this point, from what I understand. I really am ignorant.
I don't know. They say immunotherapy can give you anything that ends in itis.
Oh, yeah. And algia.
Basically. And apparently algia. Well, I think algia, I don't even think that's just one of those things where I think paramedics do this, that people be like, oh, my wrists are really aching. They'll say, oh, that's arthralgia. And they'll be like, oh, thank you, finally, a diagnosis. Like, all you did is said my wrists are aching in a Greek noun. So they're just not committing to any particular diagnosis. There's no point thinking about it for another 3 or 4 months. Yeah. If I still haven't, or to be honest, I wouldn't even know, maybe a year and it could go away. Who knows?
Yeah. You said my cancer, that sounded like it's still your pet. What's the status?
Well, that kind of depends who you ask, because there's different schools of thought.
Do you own it? Does it own you? Like, where are you at?
I don't think of myself as having cancer, but there are different clinical views, and there are people who think that's irresponsible. Because I have no evidence of disease.
Sorry, what? You have no evidence disease?
No evidence of disease. An NED, no evidence of disease. That's the formal status. Okay. So there are some people who say you need to have, if you have had stage 4 cancer, you need to have had no evidence of disease for 5 years before you can describe yourself as not having cancer.
Okay. Yeah.
But the thing about immunotherapy is that for people who respond so well that the cancers disappear, the outcomes are so different than for people who get to no evidence of disease from other surgeries and stuff, that there's an argument for using different language, and then there's an argument against. So it kind of depends on your clinician and you and whatever, really.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, you can kind of choose how you see it. As long as you're well informed, I don't think it really matters, because it's like, I know I'm not healthy in some sense. So, and I'm at a very elevated risk of developing tumors, but from everything we know, the study's been going on 7 years, and most of those people haven't.
So what exactly is immunotherapy? I don't know if we've covered this or not, but just to get up
So
to
it's
speed.
well, I can tell you, I will caveat everything I'm saying, like, this is my patient perspective.
Yeah.
It's a drug which ends in MAB, so sometimes they're called MABs, and it, unlike chemotherapy, which basically just makes your whole body sick, but has the advantage of killing cancer cells, what immunotherapy does is it trains your immune system to identify cancer as a threat and to attack it and to eliminate it. And so for those cases which are eligible, which is a minority, and which work, which is a minority within that minority, you can shrink the cancer, but it might come back, but you get some time from it. And it's kind of always this, the strongest effect of the drug is at the beginning. So it's not going to increase over time. It's going to decrease over time. So they can sort of look at it and say, okay, if it's had such and such an effect on you, projecting forward, that's the best we're going to get in the first 3 months, roughly. Do you know what I mean? So it's a bit like if you had a nightclub and you told the bouncers that the local police were on strike, and then you just gave them a hat load of cocaine and just said, right, go and find stuff to beat up. And so you're like, your immune system's hyper aggressive. So people get all sorts of weird things like loads of mouth ulcers, because that's your immune system isolating things. And I had this mad thing which happened to me. So I went for a walk in the forest, and I kind of swung underneath a tree, and a single drop of cold water went right into my eardrum. And I basically had to lie on one side for a week. It was insane. It was like I had a smoke alarm strapped to my head. It was the worst earache. It must have been like some tiny bit of moss in this drop of water or something. And I've never had anything like it. It was crazy. I thought I was going to have to go to hospital. And I think that was probably exacerbated by immunotherapy, that your immune system is kind of saying foreign object, foreign object. And you get like, I don't know, it was just all sorts of weird. There's all sorts of weird things. So every time you have a dose, you have to go in the day before your dose, and they run through these questions, and it's like, have the palms of your hands and feet changed color, and all of this kind of stuff. Because it can screw you up in so many different ways. On the other hand, apparently, I learned that there are some people who go in, they've had like a lifetime of psoriasis, unfortunately have developed stage 4 cancer, and then they give them immunotherapy and the psoriasis goes. So immunotherapy is largely regarded as, if there's, so it sort of depends how you phrase it. You can say if there's going to be a cure for cancer, it will come from immunotherapy. Another way to say it is there is a cure for cancer, but it only works in a really small number of cases.
Do you know what makes one case special and one case ineligible?
I know that only a quarter of cases are eligible, and I think that's some kind of, it's going to be something really long I don't understand. It's some kind of genetic marker of the cancer. It's a particular type of cancer, but that doesn't mean place in the body. It means there are different kind of ways of mutating or something. I don't really know.
Yeah, weird.
And I know that you can't, again, I want to be careful, because this might just be the MAB I was on, or it might be all MABs, but you can't have it if you have HIV positive status or any autoimmune disorder, I think. And beyond that, exercise helps, and other than that, it's sort of in the hands of the gods.
Yeah.
And in my case, surgery wasn't possible. But the thing I've learned about cancer is it's an insanely personal disease. It's really every single, but maybe this isn't true if it's like stage 1 and it's got nice and early, but if you ask people about their cancer, the answer always has like but or if. It's always like, well, da, 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 but they don't know. Da, da, do you know what I mean? It seems like this, and the way it spreads, if it does spread, will be different in different ways. So then you've got like, can you or can you not operate? Will it or will it not respond positively to this or that? There's so many different things that it becomes really difficult to talk about, because as soon as you start talking about it, people think you're talking about their Uncle Pete. Or people tell you about their Uncle Pete and his cancer and start telling you, and you're sitting there thinking, no, my cancer's not operable. You need to stop talking. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's, and I don't know the extent to which the numbers that I know and what I know about immunotherapy is true of various others. I think that I'm right in saying it's most advanced in the treatment of breast and lung cancer, I think. And colon cancer is also fairly well researched.
And you got through the woods, but you were kind of hanging in limbo for a long time, right?
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, you had news, so you were in a state of waiting for news.
Oh, yeah. Well, it could have gone one of two ways, the final meeting, because I had this PET scan, which you don't have all the time because they're so expensive and intrusive.
Yeah.
And it takes like a day to have a PET scan.
What do they do?
End, like with the,
is it just a big machine you enter into? Or
it's a big machine, but you have to you have to have low-level radioactive fluid injected into you first. So then you have to be isolated in a steel room for ages, and you have to agree not to go near
babies,
women or children, because women might be pregnant.
So you're basically an honorary glowy for a day.
Yeah, and then the process itself isn't massively different from an MRI. It's you're in a sort of torpedo tube, and it's not that bad, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's one of those things where if you think about it and focus on it, you're only going to make it worse. So
it generates this really high resolution photograph, and then then the doctors trawl it, or they maybe even use AI to trawl the data.
So my understanding is that what a CAT scan does is like more like a photograph, and what a PET scan does is like if you took all of those photographs and put them together to make a movie. So what it's doing is it's looking at the sus tissue that they're kind of like, what is that? Is that still cancer? Is that whatever? And recording science things which take place over time.
Yeah,
so you've reached the end of my knowledge, but it's something to do with that, and that gives them a lot more information. So in my case, because it wasn't operable, if I'd gone in that last meeting and they'd said, okay, sorry, but it's grown by 5 millimeters, rather than what the news I did get, which is that the very, very small kind of chickpea size thing which is left is dead. If they'd said that wasn't dead and it started to grow, there's not really that much they would have been able to do.
So this thing, this your little my cancer thing is now just being recycled slowly by your body, just kind of.
I think it will just stay there, but there's no evidence that it's active disease. So my understanding is like, yeah, you're definitely going to want to look at that next time I'm scanned.
Just a body part.
But then
doesn't do anything.
There are 5 different places in my body where I had cancer. So they're going to want to look at all of those places.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're also probably just going to want to look at the whole thing because I've had cancer which spreads around my body. So they might want to look at just generally.
Do you need to be on
abdomen.
ongoing immunotherapy, or is that you just did like the thing
Done.
and then see what happens? Okay.
And the theory is that basically for, we don't really know what proportion of
Don't
people,
even really know.
but for a lot of those people, that cancer might be kind of bubbling back up at a microscopic level, but that their body's immune systems is defeating it as it comes back, which is what makes it so different from all of the other therapies where you have to find it, work out a way to deal with it. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to remove it surgically. You're going to blast it with radiotherapy. And after a while, a lot of people who are in that situation just kind of say, you know, I've been doing this so many years.
Yeah. So kind of your body is always writing a script because you're a living creature. You have to live through time, so it's always like kind of regenerating itself. And then cancer is like a script that is destructive of the rest of the script, and it starts in one little thing, and then your body just learns to grow in this certain direction. And then what you taught your other system, your immunosystem, is to edit that script, to take it out.
Kind of. I suppose you could. It's not the way I would phrase it, but it's all metaphor, right? We could use different metaphors. The way I think of it is more that if you were, probably only because I just recently watched Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but like if you were running MI5 in the 1970s and you found out you had a mole, then you turn up the heat on everyone, right? Yeah. Even your most loyal men, you could be kind of like, I'm not sure about you anymore. So it's more like launching an internal inquisition. Because you have to remember, cancer is yourself, so it's you versus you.
Yeah.
So that's my metaphor. Is more like kind of a traitor found in the MI5 or something, and like root the traitor out.
So now that you have life and a future, what's your important stack? What's your stack of importances and concerns? I know you don't. You might not be into complaining anymore, but things still get on your nerves, I'm sure.
I had about 4 days where you would think I was the Buddha. Like, honestly, I was like, it was quite. I thought I would never be capable of feeling negative emotion again, and then I woke up and it was normal again. I just woke up and had a really bad day and started like ranting at things in my head and thought, oh, okay, that ended, because I did genuinely have a period of quite very intense. I've not ever experienced anything like that. Euphoria, probably quite a lot of adrenaline and stuff as well. And then that's kind of normalized now. I find myself able to be a bit more normal.
Yeah. New normal. Yeah.
But it does leave you very different in a lot of other ways. Like, I think that was almost like a kind of mood, I don't know how to say, a shock, all sorts of things in there, an abnormal kind of psychological state that I was wandering around in. And I did wonder, am I going to be like this for the rest of my life? Because it would have been beautiful, but I suppose no. Well, so if you ask me what I'm going to do, the first thing I threw myself into research in the last couple of months very heavily, and I'm going to finish that. I'm going to try and write up a paper and actually get that done.
Is it like some obscure academic linguistic thing? I think you mentioned something that you're.
Yeah, it's in that family, but I've had quite a bit of a breakthrough in the last 2 months in particular, largely because of Grok and wanting to being able to use Grok as a search tool properly. and also just like plain avoidance. Like, I can't think about this. I can't think about this. I can't think
Yeah.
about this. So just kind of, throwing myself into that. So I'm going to do that before I do anything else. And then there's all sorts of things that we've talked about, like which country do we stay in, this country or do we move, which have just been shelved. Everything's been shelved. The hole in the roof has been shelved.
Mm.
At some point, I'm going to need a job once I've, kind of
Yeah.
settled back down and
Yeah.
all of these kinds of things, which are just not problems I thought I would have. And it's kind of
Yeah.
amazing.
Normal life problems.
Yeah.
You like my posts on Twitter that are
Yeah, I like
kinda
it.
my post gender explorations. We met through gender,
Well,
but
we did meet through gender, but by post-gender, you mean your abandonment of gender.
well, I moved on from the field, kind of. I mean,
Well, the first thing I saw of yours wasn't anything to do with trans. It was Evergreen.
race.
Race. Yeah. And a subject which I think is probably a lot more important than a lot of people are giving it credit for, which is personality disorders.
Mm.
Because there's a lot of that in Evergreen.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a lot of that everywhere. I think
There's a
that's
lot
what
of that
makes the
everywhere,
world
and I've
go.
been thinking about this because you kind of think, presumably there's been a lot of it everywhere since the beginning of time, but if you lived in a little Neolithic village, by the age of 22, everyone's going to have the 18 families in that village are all going to be like, don't talk to that person because that person tried to break up a marriage, told a kid that's not your real mum, all of this stuff. And by 25, you're going to be living at the bottom of the hill by yourself and be the weird person. And now we have the internet. So we all are going to have to learn more, unfortunately, about dealing with people with personality disorders. You look like you disagree with that.
No, I'm just trying to think of that at scale. How do you notice personality disorders? I'm thinking about like the wheelhouse that I kind of engage with right now, the liberal versus post-liberal on the right kind of tug of war for power. And the liberals are funny because they just assume that they're right. And that everything's solved.
Well, that's because they're good people.
They're really good, and it's like the liberals. I was thinking about this. Liberals and libertarians have this problem where they kind of lack a theory of mind for people that are stupider or smarter than them. They're kind of like midwits, and they're actually higher end midwits, right? But they don't have a theory of mind that not everybody can solve problems through rational debate. That's just not how human beings actually operate. And you try to convince them, and then you kind of pull it apart, and they eventually you get down to their fantasies. Like they have their own like mythological substrate.
And with the gender thing, there is a connection because there's this phenomenon where there are certain people who are hell-bent on doing it. They will do it. They will kill themselves unless they do it. They are sure, yeah. They're sure. They have the operation. They wake up. They go, holy crap, this was a mistake. That obviously shows that you can't reason people out. That it's a cry for help, a very emotional experience. You couldn't ever have reasoned them out of it, arguably. So therefore, what's the answer? Okay, so either you have to say ban it. Ban it.
Ban
Goodbye
what?
to the liver. That type of operation, that type of surgery. Let's say, just as an example.
Make it to be something you'd have to go to Thailand and pay like a skeezy doctor to achieve. Like
and you'd have to do a lot more than that, and there's all sorts of problems with it. But the point is that if you accept the idea, if you disagree with what you've said, and you say, no, you can reason this all out with anyone, including people who don't have, for whatever reason, it's not just intelligence, it's also where they are at a particular point. Yeah. Then, and you're not prepared to say, okay, we're just going to ban this, then what happens is you turn indifference into a compassion, into a virtue, and you turn compassion into a vice. And that's what the liberals and the libertarians have in common. So you end up, do you know what I mean?
Go into that again. You turn indifference into a virtue and compassion into a vice. Expand on that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Well, that's what the libertarians, if you think about it, right? The whole, well, let people choose their own journey thing, which is very left coded. And I don't really care if you liberal freaks want to sterilize yourselves, lol, which is very right coded. It's the same thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're saying do what you want. It's just one of them is kind of like, I'm saying do what you want because I'm a lovely person, and the other one is saying something else. But
Darwin work it out. Yeah.
Right. And I think that goes through everything that that the liberals and you're right, liberals and libertarians, as much as they don't like to be put together, they are together.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if we can go back from there, but it's fun to explore the problems with that, and plus even because I'm a liberal. I can't not be a liberal. That's the soup that I grew up in. That's my culture, whether I like it or not. But we have such a problem with authority that even the thought of banning access to a technology is just like, we can't even, like, how could you possibly just, we always come back. The only thing we can actually do is come back to children, and then kind of women too, but we have to do it in a very circumspect way. We can't tell women that they don't have access to things, but even women admit that they need a little bit of social control because they're always whinging about, like, society made me do this. Society, their locus of control is always externalized. So even they want to kind of have protections, safeguards for them. But we can definitely say children, no children. We can't do this to children. I spoke with Andrew Doyle about this, and he couldn't define why. Why not children?
I saw. And I think
it's like when I had Heather Heying on, and she's like, well, we all know that gang rape is wrong. I'm like, how do we know that, though? From your evolutionary perspective, from any sort of perspective, this liberal perspective that just kind of sneaks in this morality. And
it's a fear of saying, actually, I don't know that it's wrong, but I'm going to put my foot down and use my authority and say I'm making it wrong through a declaration in society with my own strength, and that you're saying that's more male?
No, I'm not saying that.
Being?
I'm sorry. I kind of went off a little bit on the feminist kind of the woman problem. Like the women admit to themselves in their own research that society molds them more than anything else, and so the natural follow from that is that we need to reshape society to keep women safe, because they beauty standards or sexism or something. It's always kind of the society is the problem that molds women. But we can definitely say that children are off limits for these things. But why? What makes a child a child? And ultimately it comes down to exerting, like you said, it's exerting authority and saying this is the rule of law and we're going to enforce this. And it has nothing to do with our rational argumentation. That stuff is off the board because we've decided that this class of people, children specifically, need to be protected. But that says that they're not rational agents, right? Which means that there's a hole in liberalism right there. There's just like this magic door where you can suddenly become a liberal because like you suddenly have cognitive function or something.
Yes. And I think that I look back at the work I did, and I do think I wish I'd spent a lot less time talking about age, which is a dodgy thing to say because then people say, oh, you're fine with children being muted. No. I think I agree very strongly with Michelle Aleva. I just don't think this is right for anyone. And I think that one of the many problems in the liberal perspective on it is that you're not the same person at different points in your life and your adult life. And that's not, it's the liberal march towards the horizon. Everything is just by definition getting better. So if we do the next logical thing, that's probably going to improve society. And that doesn't even work within your own life because you might be in a terrible way compared to how you were 3 years before. And that's got nothing to do with being a child because that could hold for like you at 30 versus you at 33.
Yeah. Mental disorders, life circumstances, even just like you had a bad cup of coffee. I mean, there's so many different contingencies.
So a better way to look at it is to look at the specifically all of that stuff is, I just think very simply, is it's medical malpractice. It just doesn't meet a global threshold to exist as an industry. Like
Okay,
global
based
as
on
in the
what?
sense of based on
Thorough
the,
research. I think there's enough. Once we have a
yeah,
research
there's enough
threshold, so
research.
there's that.
Yeah, there's that. I think it's legitimate to say beyond that, if you told me that that's wrong, I would say, well, you're still lying. And there is a fundamental, I think this is why a lot of gay people feel strongly about it, because when we come out, we're telling a truth. You can think what you like about it, but we are actually telling a truth, which is quite difficult. Whereas this whole thing is genuinely actually a lie. We've made it nice.
Okay, it's
But,
one thing to say I'm gay. It's another thing to say I'm a woman or a man.
well, if you're not a woman, yeah, then yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you're asking, it's a very different set of asks, because you're not saying make me, like a lot of the gay rights movement was saying, don't make us lie, don't make us pretend. And this is saying, not only do you have to agree with me that with my lie, but we all have to pretend I'm not even lying in the first place, which is why this absurd and boring conversation about passing, because it's like, well, if I know that you're a fake man or a fake woman, it doesn't really matter if you pass, because I can't unknow that. Which is probably the kind of thought you can only have if you are conservative, because otherwise you're kind of trying to trickle it all through as rights of like, well, that's a good point. Do you infringe upon other people's rights if
Yeah.
you, do you know? And I just kind of think, I don't really care what you look like. It's still a lie.
There's that aspect to it where it goes from a truth to a lie with regard to being gay to being trans. But there's also like the gay rights movement on a propagandistic level through Hollywood and media was a push to either normalize it or train as much as possible disgust out of society for that behavior, right?
Yeah.
Training people to not be disgusted by it and to just kind of build a barrier of acceptance around it. And that what happens over there happens over there. But those tools of training society to not be disgusted by this thing were co-opted by the trans movement, where instead of training out disgust, you're training out absurdity. Like a man in a dress was super duper funny until we had to start taking it seriously, right? Until society.
Yeah, there's probably something in that, yeah.
Right?
There's
was
probably
watching
something
a
in the
stream
idea
where,
of
yeah, it's like, why would a man want to
absurdity.
look like a woman? Like, that's just absurd. But now I have to respect you, so I have to suppress my absurd reaction to that. And that's where passing kind of comes in, because it's less absurd.
The key word in there is want, because if you look at a man who's dressing like a woman, he obviously wants to do that, because in the morning you get dressed. You don't put on a sexual orientation in the morning. Now we can that's not the whole of the thing, right? Because then there's the consequence of society and all the rest of it. But this is what we all know, is you're making a choice.
Yeah.
This is the whole problem with the concept of trans, is that it puts something forward as immutable, which isn't a choice. But now I look at it and I think, but you're right, that's a lot broader, because it's really about an inability to have authority, to be unapologetic about authority, which is clearly a massive problem across the West in all sorts of ways.
In all sorts of ways.
All sorts of ways, yeah.
If you look at Britain, Keir Starmer, he's mad about, he understands that people are mad about immigration. He's going to do something about it. But after years of just softening the blow and calling everybody who's against it racist, arresting people for disagreeing with it.
Oh, well, there's a guy on YouTube who's kind of, I don't really know that much about him. People make fun of him. It's kind of a class thing. I don't know, maybe like Duck Dynasty or something, but like, when somebody gets popular, but a lot of it's kind of sniggering or whatever. But whatever, he's a guy and he's influential. I don't know if he is on YouTube or Instagram or something, but he's one of those people.
Does he have a name that you recall?
I think he's called Dino, but I will be honest and say I don't know if people use that as a term of abuse to make fun of him, because the circles I'm in is everyone's like, here's what Dee knows. Do you know Drogba Kunli,
No,
the account? Oh, I can't believe you don't know
maybe I
Drukpa
do. What
Kunli.
is it again?
It's Drukpa Kunli. It's quite difficult to. I'll type it down for you at some point, but it is.
Okay.
And anyway,
Right.
I'm losing my thread. There's this guy, and basically, I don't know that much about him, but he's quite a sort of working class lad. He has bright, brilliant, white, perfect teeth, and he goes to the gym all the time. He's got tattoos, and he does that apparently on some show or whatever platform. I sound very old. And he criticised the UK government, and they stopped him at the border. They stopped him at the border on re-entry into the country. Now, in this summer,
Huh.
I'm going back to the UK to meet
Yeah.
my nieces. So
I
I
was
better be
not.
nice
I
about
didn't
the
have a
dear leader,
zero.
haven't I?
I didn't have zero concern about me going to the art conference in London because I had posted snarkily under these different these authoritarian police departments.
I mean, all I can say to you, Benjamin, is I have deep faith in Keir Starmer. He is a charismatic leader. He is leading the country to victory. He will save the pensioners from the cold. And
Hmm.
well done, everyone who voted Labour. Because if I say anything else, I don't really want to get stopped at the border of Heathrow and put
But
in a room by somebody in the
this
Home
is
Office for 6 hours.
this is kind of like the weird contradiction with late stage liberalism. It's that nobody has any authority, but when authority is required of the government, it has to be dressed up in marmish garb, like we're auntie, like we're gonna help you, like we finally do have authority, and then it's very tyrannical. It's like, well, you can't say things that harm other people. Like
Well,
this
you
whole
can though, because
two-tier
it's
justice.
anarcho tyranny. That's the thing. It's two tiers. It's anarcho tyranny. You come down
Yeah.
harder on the people who consent, basically,
Hmm.
and it's not even as individuals. It's more like as groups. It's a euphemism,
Hmm.
and that some of those groups are just saying we don't really consent, and the state's answer to that is, okay, well, try and behave yourselves, and the state's answer to everyone else is, right, okay, we're introducing chicken licensing. That sounds like a joke. It's not. There are now chicken
Chicken license.
licenses,
Yeah,
yeah, you have
chickens.
to have a license to have a chicken.
Well,
Keir is keeping us safe by
what
protecting the
from bird
chickens.
flu
Oh, I
or
don't
animal
know.
husbandry, like or abuse?
Administratively irresponsible chickens, I imagine.
It's so
Like
weird.
chickens not filling out their council tax form properly, or I don't know. It's very difficult to say. I do think that there's a risk of overestimating the extent to which the people in the British Parliament think. And that's the end of their sentence.
Let's go
I
along to
look
get
at them and
along.
I can be people kind of going like, what is this as a direction? It's like, well, why are we all agreeing that there's a direction? Why are we
Mm,
all agreeing that this is thought out in any way? I don't see any evidence of that in Britain at all. I
yeah.
think what's going on in Britain is quite different. I
It's
don't
just
really
kind
think
of
anything's.
managing something. Like when I've been speaking with British people, especially younger men, and it doesn't seem like, well, one, the government isn't for that set of people, it's for something else, but it just doesn't seem like after World War II you guys have had a direction.
No, this is the David. Do you know who David Starkey is?
Probably.
David's this is his. I mean, he puts it beautifully. He basically just said every decision that's been made since World War II in Britain is crap. And what he's arguing for, and he's trying to work behind the scenes with Reform and the Conservatives, as far as I can gather, he's quite open about this.
Hmm.
Is he's arguing for a piece of legislation called the Great Repeal Act, which would basically just remove all laws between 97 and 2010 in one hit, which you could do in Britain. You could
97.
do that in one parliamentary act if you have the cojones and if you. There's one magic trick which you need, and it is I don't really care, Margaret. Constitutionally, I don't really care, Margaret is the entire thing, because in the British system, there is no authority higher than the Parliament. So as long as you've got a majority, you can do
Hmm.
whatever the bejesus you like.
Hmm.
And he's arguing that essentially every decision which has been made, certainly 97 to 2010, is so bad that it justifies literally having an act of parliament which says, scrap it. So he makes the argument. It's quite controversial, but I agree with him that part of the unique history of England is that it's one of the only countries which has ever rolled back a revolution that went wrong. And that it did so by doing exactly that, by just coming in and looking at everything Cromwell did, the entire thing, and just going, bin it, go back. And he's saying we should do that. He's saying take every single thing Blair did, but it's a huge... Wow. It's very interesting in the British constitutional system, because the thing is that nearly everything Blair did, the Liberals treat as though it is the love child of God and Stonehenge, that they treat it like it's, they sort of say like things like the Supreme Court in this tone, like the Supreme Court, and it has existed since 2009, and it's a failed institution. Get rid of it. And yet they'll sort of pretend that that's illegal. It's not illegal. There's nothing illegal at all about it. Parliament can do whatever it likes. But
wait, was the Supreme Court, and why was it invented? Why did they create it? To ape America?
It was
somehow? To have more power?
No, it's kind of complicated, but it's a cynic's argument would be that what Blair did is used kind of West Wing brained, Americanized language. And it all Supreme Court sounds very modern. It sounds very American, or maybe very French, very sophisticated. And that it used to be a function of the House of Lords, which sounds very old and decrepit and boomerish. So they created the Supreme Court, and then just go around saying things like the Supreme Court's independent. But the thing is, you have a Supreme Court, you have open hearings, you talk about conservative and liberal justices. It's all very open. If you even name Brenda Hale, who's at the top of the Supreme Court, they start saying things like it's a populist attack on the judiciary, she's a neutral expert, and the woman is a raving shitlib, basically, and there's no way to get rid of her. There's no mechanism, as far as I can see. It's all just another one of these things. So this is what the parliaments have done since 97, is create an institution, call it independent, give it power, pretend that it has its power, and they'll say things like, our system is based on separation of powers. No, it's not. It's just not. And so they've picked bits of other people's systems. And the idea behind it is to essentially give all of their friends in London the right to make decisions which have political consequence, and then say, that's a modern democracy. And isn't it America coded? And because people don't know their arse from their elbow, they don't have the wit to say, oh, right, okay, it's American. So if I look to America, then I'll see no appointment process, no discussion of the political biases of people in the Supreme Court, which is, of course, not true. And they do this with everything. So we've just had an example of this thing called the Sentencing Council, where they set up, I mean, Tory, Labour, whatever. I'm sure you've seen this, right?
It's so funny that it's like they read George Orwell as an instruction manual. Like, they can't help it either. It's like, really? The Security Council? What could that be about?
So
what does it do? What's the Security Council? What is it securing?
Oh, no, it's Sentencing Council. Sentencing
okay.
Council.
Who's sentencing?
Well, maybe you haven't heard this, that it basically provides guidelines on how justice should be administered, essentially, right?
Okay.
In some way. So it's issued these recommendations saying that if you're from a faith-based minority, or if you're a woman, or if you're trans, obviously, or whatever, you should go to prison for less time, which is disgusting and a violation of Magna Carta, which goes back to 1215 and is the oldest document in the world to limit the powers of a king, because it demands equal treatment under the law, and there's all sorts of other problems. And basically, they got their liberal London friend, and they all think this, right? They all think this Marxist drivel. Give one of them, whose name is Baroness Carr, or in my dialect, Ms. Carr, and put her in charge of this rotten little sentencing council. And then she and her friends tried to pass this law, and it was just stopped at the 11th hour last night. It was due to go in, and it didn't go into law. And what they were evidently trying to do was just sit there and say, well, unfortunately, the Independent Sentencing Council has just decided to have, to treat white people and Christians and males and straight people more harshly, and there's nothing we can do. And it's gibber. There is no higher power in the land. They have an absolute right. It's insane. It's genuinely insane. And this is what they've done throughout the whole of the British constitutional system: is create, since 97, create entities and then pretend that those entities have the parliament on a leash. And then when they're asked to justify it, they just start randomly repeating lines that they heard from the West Wing. I'm not even joking. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. So they'll say
Aaron
things like
Sorkin.
yeah, and they'll say things like separation of powers. It's like, did you see the coronation? Penny Mordaunt was dressed like a Star Wars extra with a sword. Like, what part of that says separation of powers to you? There's no separation of power. That's the whole point. But it sounds modern. So you kind of think, okay, fine, Keir Starmer, let's have separation of powers. Presidential election, please. That's a separation of powers. Separate the legislature. It's funny how that doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of... So what Starkey's solution is very elegant, actually. It's essentially just to come in and dump.
So
everything.
Politically, he has to orchestrate a parliamentary majority. This is just interesting. So it's evidenced that what you're talking about, this phenomena that this elite class is kind of very sneakily gathered up all this power, created like these pockets of power.
I wouldn't use that language, but I'm being nitpicky. But I am very tight on language these days. I would never call the people running Britain elite. You would not catch me dead using that word.
Okay. Well,
if I'm an elite
them?
tennis player,
Insiders?
it doesn't mean I repeatedly hit myself in the face with a tennis racket. It means I beat you at tennis. They're not elite.
Okay.
I would call them people who live in central London. Would be a good term.
Okay.
But, that sounds very, I don't know, but there's something in there, because that's the whole problem right there, is that there hasn't been an ability for a changing of the guard. Look at all those houses which went on sale in Arlington, Virginia. You can't do that in the British system yet. You can if you had the balls to go in and say, no parliament could bind the next, we're scrapping literally everything you have done since 1997.
That's my kind of what I'm trying to get my head around. Like, how does a pair of balls get grown and then actually have the power to execute anything if we're talking about some sort of parliamentary democracy? I guess it's through, I don't know, persuasion and then leveraging a bunch of different people's desires to go along, right?
Well, kind of. But the thing about it is,
I mean, you can't have a strong man like we did with Trump, insofar as he is.
No, that's not true. That's a misperception.
Okay.
You can.
So you can. Okay.
The Prime Minister has power in and with and through Parliament. It's all about Parliament. Everything's about Parliament. Which means the lower house of the Parliament. So as long as you can command a majority, you can do whatever you like, basically. You really can. So there are all these people saying, oh, well, we couldn't do that because we don't have executive orders. They've misunderstood. There's no one to order. Why do we need executive orders? There isn't a separation. So all the Prime Minister would have to do is get a majority of people in the Parliament from whatever party to agree. Now, assuming the Prime Minister commanded a majority, and that his majority or her majority was loyal, and that you had a general election where that party, or potentially more than one party, went into it with a commitment saying, if you vote for us, we will, blah, 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 then that's all you need. So there's kind of a bit of a myth that, you can't have a strong man. But it's somebody what needs to be done is an awful lot more radical than what you've done. Relative to the country, an awful lot more radical.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And so there has to be political will, and I'm sure that the opposition had already thought about that, and that's why mass immigration is central to maintaining power. They need a bunch of people who are dependent on them to keep this counter majority from coming in and undoing all the work they've done to sequester power.
Yeah, but there's lots that's probably true. I think there's lots of things that would do that. I think that there's going to be an attempt quite soon to introduce proportional representation.
What does that mean?
So like rank choice preference voting. So any kind of system which doesn't involve we count all the votes and whoever came first and that's it. One of these systems where you add everything up and then 3 people win and all of this kind of stuff. And if they do that, everything's going to get even worse. And that could be a way, because that's what's happened in Germany. Basically, nobody can get more than 30% of the vote. Ever. So you can have, like, if you look at Germany, it's not that different from the UK. It's about 2/3 of people think that there's a massive, massive crisis going on with immigration and that there needs to be a response, which is a lot like what Donald Trump has done, and that's fine and reasonable. And yet these Europeanized voting systems, which Britain doesn't yet have, but might as well have at the minute, because of the way that things are, that if that's introduced, I think it will it will entrench what you've spoken about.
Yeah,
it stops an opposition forming.
It's fascinating to watch how power has entrenched itself in this really hyper complex, very fair sounding ideascape, right? But basically it just means that the system, there's no feedback loop between the people in the system because it's so convoluted. The system's actually sequestered itself or protected itself from
and then there's another thing which no one ever talks about, because if you get into it, it turns into like a 50-minute conversation, but one of the things that people don't understand is what they've done to local government, which doesn't even really exist anymore in the UK. There's now this kind of idea that some people have this thing called devolution, which is like federalism, and some people don't. So did you go to Swindon? I think you did go to Swindon. When you went to England.
Yeah. And visited Lotus Eaters, yeah.
If you live in London, the largest entity which you can elect to is London, which is 9 million people. If you live anywhere in Scotland, the largest entity you can elect to is Scotland, Parliament, which is 5 million people. If you live in Swindon, the largest entity in the entire UK you can elect to is Swindon Town Council.
Oh.
So there's no higher entity. It was taken out of its county, and there's no English Parliament, specifically for England. So we now have a situation where London, left-wing, Scotland, left-wing, historically at least still, Wales, more left-wing, have unified like parliaments within the country, and they have a leadership of representing 9 million for London, 5 million for Scotland, 3 million for Wales. Conservative England, you've got your puny little, these things they've created called unitary authorities, which again is so much nicer if you say it in a Starmer voice, unitary authorities, because it's like this dead, horrible, like something from Dunder Mifflin. Do you know what I mean? It's all like kind of form, and there's no romance in it at all. And they've broken up England in particular, and basically, if we're going to speak honestly, white England, into all of these tiny little bits. And Starmer is now the final twist of the knife. He's coming in and getting rid of the last historic counties and having everything is going to be like Swindon. Basically, that you have a mini, I don't know what to call it, like a mini representative. And so, of course, whatever a national government does, if Sadiq Khan doesn't like it, Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, everyone knows his name. Who knows the name of the chief executive of the Unitary Authority of Swindon? Nobody knows that. So there's then a completely asymmetrical distribution of power in terms of who can respond to the parliament domestically. Now this, you can't understand without going all the way back to 1961. So there's an argument that 1997 isn't enough, and that we need to say, while we're at it, and to go back all the way to 1961 and reverse all of those decisions.
What happened in 1961 specifically that led to this?
The creation of Greater London. The creation of Greater London.
For economic
Well,
reasons?
they
Or?
did it in a way that was quite sensible, felt quite sensible to them at the time, which is kind of like planning that it's basically an urban area. But they took a very different view from what you've taken. If your political class had done the same thing, they would have created like the tri-state area. They would have said, okay, that needs to be a state. We're going to change the state boundaries. Do you see what I mean? So they wanted to match boundaries with urban areas,
Okay, yeah.
thinking that this would make the country more efficient, but it's an incredibly stupid. It hasn't worked. It's been a disaster.
Because
it's
the people in the
worked,
cities then get to dictate what the people in the country are able to do and the values.
it's more complicated than that. It depends on which city. But in London, what it's done with London is it's created a hyper arrogant miniature country which doesn't really care about anywhere else and has the arrogance of Hollywood, DC, and Wall Street in one place,
Yeah.
which is not good. What it's done with, I mean, okay, so let me name you some unitary authorities: Rotherham, Rochdale. These places where this abuse went on, they got away with it because there's no higher entity. So these places, a lot of them, they're very ethnically divided, and they have like, I don't know, whatever, 250,000 people, and that is your only elected chamber in the entire country, short of the UK Parliament.
And there's no like federal FBI kind of level authority that can go around and police anybody. There's just local.
Oh, I'm sure there are
areas
50,000. I'm sure there are loads of them, but it doesn't matter because essentially these things never broke out. Now, if we'd just done nothing after the war and you still had plain old, boring old counties, these scandals wouldn't have happened in the unitary authority of Rotherham, which is really disproportionately kind of racially biased in a certain way. It would have happened in a county, a nice big county with millions of people. And suddenly, do you see what I mean? And then there would have been oversight and there would have been an interplay between different levels of the administrative system. But instead, there was just this fiefdom. They just created these miniature fiefdoms. So in many ways, every single aspect of the system has just been made in this kind of ad hoc way just to get to you to where we are now. And where we are now is disaster.
Yeah, does Britain have a sense of the world other than just globalism? Like, does it have a sense of its destiny as a people or as an island? Or is that too painful because of whatever happened in World War II leading to the disbanding of Britain's power?
No, I think it's split.
Does it have any, like, anything to stand on? That's why I keep on, like, where do the cojones come from? Like, or are they just kind of
from the younger, the big, I think another big difference that's going on is that there's a massive generational split. It was really funny when Kemi Badenoch was elected Tory leader because all of these boomers were like, well, that'll show the left. We're the real face of diversity. And you could just see everyone under the age of 30 just die because you're like, that's not going to show the. Have you not been paying attention? Did you not see the bit where they ignored the first non-white prime minister, the 3 female prime ministers, the first Jewish prime minister, and I think that's the problem. Is there's a huge
so the Conservatives had somewhat of a diversity hire in order to get in the good graces of the left, but the left is very selective with. I mean, they even say it. I mean,
yeah, I don't like thinking of Kemi Badenoch in that way.
Yeah, I know.
I don't like that because I thought she was
disparaging.
good, or I thought she was going to be better, but she's not good, and it
Not
was
good
in their
enough or not
logic.
competent? What do you mean not good? Or just
She's just not competent. She's treating it like an apprentice team leader task. She's not good. She's not a good communicator, and she's compared to what people thought she was going to be, and she's not good at. She doesn't. I don't know. She just doesn't have the thing. Do you know what I mean? She doesn't have the je ne sais quoi, and it's not necessarily. It's more that like with all of these people writing these articles saying like, well, we're the real face of diversity, and then after 3 hours, a prominent Labour minister called Kemi Badenoch the black face of white supremacy. It's like, well done, you bought 3 hours. That's what you got. You got 3 hours. And this is the problem, that you see all these boomers in various parties who are on the right, and they're just over and over again, they're just trying to appeal to liberals, and that is not happening among the young. In America, I think it's really different. I think there was kind of a common platform that was like Roseanne and Scott Adams and also the kids. And in Britain, the kids are behaving way more like German or French young kind of reactionary right. And it's the older right is kind of stuck in this boomerish mentality of like, if I just say I've got enough Muslim friends, something will happen that will land down from the sky and the liberals will stop calling me racist. And I think the young people have kind of got that that's not happening.
Yeah. Well, this is where I sense a disconnect between centrist influencers on Twitter and this idea of the woke right and this fear of anti-Semitism or reactionaryism, and then this construal of everybody to the right of them is basically handmaiden of Nick Fuentes. Like this strong fear of reaction and the strong fear of collectivism, when collectivism is actually justified to a certain degree, especially if we look at a small place like England, there should be a collective will of the native inhabitants of Britain that happen to be white, but they should be able to band together and have their collective will, and then smash through the explicit discrimination that's being affected on them, and then the dispossession that's happening on them, and so I can see the fear of like a fascist uprising, but I think that's a very like boomer liberal way of controlling the discourse.
It's also kind of unfair
very necessary in France and in Germany and in Britain for the native inhabitants to reclaim their sovereignty based on where they come from.
This is the thing that frustrates me about this woke right thing, is it's not fair to do what Blair did again from the other direction. So Blair came in and went like, oh, we're all very modern, separation of powers, and wrecked everything by only separating some powers and others. And now if you get people coming in and saying like, hey, I'm on the right, but I'm not a fascist. Everyone in the world can be British. Whoa. No, if Americans want to do everyone in the world is pre-American, that's Americans' business. It's clearly related to that moment of expansion across the West and that wonderful history, and that's all amazing and everything. Yeah. But you have a continent to fill if you choose. Yeah. And it's really not fair to do that. And of course, it all looks doubly absurd from here in Ireland because, of course, being Irish gets you nothing. You get 1 millisecond of sympathy for being a victim of colonialism, and then we're rolling straight from that into we're going to trans your children whiteness.
And flood your country with
there's these down the road. There was this woman, this like, she's probably called Bridget or something, or Mary, like the 60-year-old completely normal Irish woman who filmed this thing where this African guy who's like 20 started just like yelling at her like, we're here because you colonized our country, and poor Bridget from Tipperary is like, sorry, what? And so it doesn't, and I think that that's the problem, is that in all of our countries, the boomers, there's a much bigger age divide, and the worse it gets, the more they start fretting about the growth of fascism. And it's, of course, stupid because you just look at Poland and they're just like, no, we just have quite strict migration.
Yeah.
I don't really care, Margaret.
Yeah. We don't really care.
Don't really care, Margaret. Yeah. And that's it. So I don't know where the leadership comes from. I don't think on current evidence it's going to be Kemi Badenoch, and I don't think it's going to be Nigel Farage. Everyone will hate me.
Well, I don't know. Like I haven't been following it that closely, but the Reform seems to be turning into controlled opposition. There's some hanky-panky. I have no idea. But it does seem
hanky-panky.
Yeah. Anything that's going to be legitimate is already going to be delegitimate as opposition. As soon as your opposition party gains legitimacy, it automatically has to be delegitimize itself as opposition and become a part of the blob. It just seems like that's just what's going to happen.
Yeah, and if you give into it, it will never work, because eventually you sit there and you end up saying things like, some of my best friends are wheelchair using black, lesbians with rare blood groups, and they'll be the ones who are really hit if we run into net zero too fast, and that's the best you can actually do. So I've learned all of that with the trans thing, right, which is that you end up with 19-year-olds can make their own decisions, but it's their kids so it comes back to the same problem, and it just doesn't work.
The cojones follow a will that is centered on. It's antithetical to the liberal point of view. It's not universalist. It's particularist, and it has to do with national pride, which is coded as fascist. You can't have any national pride. Daryl Cooper got in trouble by saying it's basically illegal to be right wing, and they're like, well, that basically means that you just want Nazis walking around, and that's the argument from the centrists. But then if you look at what's happening in Germany and in France, where they're literally legally barring right-wing thought from running anything. So it's basically, it's illegal to be right-wing.
Yeah, I don't see it ending well, and I'm not sure. I think that if it's difficult to look at these people and imagine that they're actually thinking things through. I think a lot of what's going on is that there's a lot of feeling going on, and there's a lot of reacting going on in the institutions and in the corridors of power, and there's not much forward planning.
Yeah, long term. Because there's no direction.
Because I really don't know what they think is going to happen from banning Marine Le Pen. It frightens me, but it's possible that they think that all of the people who are going to vote for her are going to go, oh no, she was corrupt. Well, I'd better vote for the left now. Like, do they actually believe that? I think they might, which is a really frightening thought, but I think they probably do.
Other people would vote?
Well, the people in power think that by doing this and getting that's going to work, and that everyone's going to be like, oh, well, now I won't vote for her because she's been found to be corrupt, rather than what everyone has universally done, which has looked at it and gone, oh, that's lawfare. Right?
Same thing with Trump. Like they tried to lock him up. They threw everything at him, and he got even stronger, popular-wise. Because you have a presidential election in the way that you do, it kind of doesn't matter because you can overrule them. That's the issue. You can overrule them. And I think overrule. Could you explain that?
The people, can overrule anyone.
But if you look at what's happening with Trump, which is really fascinating, we have a district judge in San Francisco telling him that he can't deport 47 temporary immigrants from Venezuela. So it's just a tyranny by the judiciary, and then people on the left that just hate Trump, I think irrationally, but they have some founding to do so, think that him ignoring these circuit judges is basically a constitutional crisis. Like, oh no, it's not a separation of powers if he can just ignore all these orders. But like, you can't just have like hyper leftist judges telling the president of the United States what to do. It doesn't.
Yeah, and there's a theory that, you know, that phrase that, like, when you ask a journalist the time, they'll tell you how many seconds past the minute it is, not how many minutes past the hour, which is a lovely phrase. And
when you ask a generalist?
A journalist. What's the time? They'll tell you how many seconds past the minute, not how many minutes past the hour. And I do think, in the long run, we're all facing the same problem, which is that there's these irreconcilable views of reality sharing the same space. And that you're not going to be able to resolve that from any president, process-oriented, or parliament, or process. That is quite scary.
I think patchwork is what makes sense over and over again. Like, you just have, if the liberals want to trans their children and import a bunch of people, they do that over there. But that requires some sort of balance of power that is much more direct and immediate and localized. Like, where these different city-states or counties, whatever, declare just declare that they have.
Yeah, maybe, but then what happens then? Then that's how you get Rotherham. I think you need things holding one another in attention, is what I think you need. And I also think it would be really useful in the UK to I think it would be really useful to have something like a referendum on some verbiage along the lines of your First Amendment, something like that. And that is much more effective at a national level than it is at a local level. But I take your point. I do think maybe, but then I also think, yeah, I don't want people to be able to translate kids, even if they hate me and don't care what I think. I don't think they should be able to do it. You know, maybe I just have to. Maybe that is the answer: is that you, to avoid conflict, as in actual civil war, that's what has to happen. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Either that or some sort of reality exerts a leveling force on these conflicting visions of reality.
Yeah, but I don't think that's going to happen, because I think the conflicting visions of reality are really unusually deep, and we don't have any recent common experience of having this level of division in our society. I think it's more like going back to the breaking off of Protestantism and Catholicism that you have to talk about, where it's that fundamental to your morality that people do stop talking to their family members and do stop all of this on a kind of wide scale. And I think we're going through something like that. So I'm not sure that you're going to be able to answer it with a particular
political theory,
policy, even if it is this kind of, like you say, splitting things up and letting people do what they want.
Yeah. I think there's this guy, Jordan Hall. I like him a lot. I had him on my show not too long ago. He's kind of a tech bro, kind of Christian mystic. He tried to solve the world's through solve problems of the world through this technological framework, and then he's kind of gone towards the more mystical Christian tradition and stuff. And I'm not done with his interview, but he talks about the ARC conference, which was Jordan Peterson's company or cadre people put on this conference that was trying to give a new vision of saving the West. So it was kind of like the anti-Davos, like we're like the opposition to Davos, opposition to the WEF. But they met in this building that's basically owned by the WEF. It's owned by the globalists. It was in southeast London. It was like this kind of airport thing, and everything was an appeal to saving the West, which is just one hemisphere removed from trying to save the world. So the WF is going to try to save the world. We're just going to try to save the West. But nobody could agree on like the more granular institutions. Like, let Germans be German, let Polish be Polish. Like that still is like that they don't want to rub shoulders with anything that's kind of fascistic, because they're still thinking in terms of this World War II consensus, where there's two ways we go about it. There's fascism, or there's liberalism, or there's communism. And we hate communists, and we're really scared of the fascists, but this liberal kind of limbo is just, it gets back to the WF. It's like, okay, so now you're just going to save the world through spreadsheets and through policy and through appeals to these really milquetoast appeals to getting kids away from porn and educating the youth in the correct way, when the actual energy of any sort of opposition is in the youth, and they're not listening to this kind of 90s.
No, they're not going to be tuning in remotely to that. And the issue with that I see is that across the longer this goes on, the more that young people, let's be honest, young men in Britain, France and Germany are going to start saying, no, this is about being white. Yeah. And you can't be white if you're French. You can't be white if you're British. You can't be white if you're... And of course that is...
Wait, what do you mean you can't be white if you're French? What does that mean?
Sorry, you can't be... you can't be French if you're not white, as I meant to say. That was completely upside down, but that's where they will start to go. Sorry, that was completely upside down.
Is that bothersome to you? Does that way lie conflict, tribal conflict?
Well, you're not going to be able to get to an all-white Britain. That's ridiculous.
No, right?
Because there are people who came. I mean, my late father had a friend who came in the 70s, and his kids now have kids. That's not going to happen. The problem is that the country's being shoehorned into one of two positions, which is either through this stupid liberal rhetoric, which is either all white Britain, and in order to get there we need death camps in Cheltenham or something, versus everyone in the world is pre-British, and the people who arrived 5 minutes ago and are marauding on the street because, for whatever reason, civil wars and all of this, that they've brought this sort of conflict into these communities and all of this, the 400% rise in rape, and that we're just not going to do anything about it. And there is, of course, a middle way. And there is, of course, a middle way in the sense that you can do what Singapore has done, and you can say, we're going to talk honestly about race. It's okay for us to say there's a certain number of a certain proportion which should remain of one ethnicity in our society. But other than that, yes, you are welcome, but we're not going to pretend. We're not doing who cares. We're not saying who cares if, because Greater London and California now both at 20% live births are white and 80% are non-white. And the answer to who cares is there's an awful lot of people who care. So you can either ignore them and let them keep on going until they get to, you have to be white to be American, you have to be white to be British. People in Britain will get there faster. It's not a fair comparison. It's an old world country. It was 99.9% white until 1950. So that's not going to go the same way. That's one of the things which annoys me about the woke right thing, is people coming in and judging British political opinions as though you're dealing with the United States, and you're not.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a different timeline and all the rest of it. So the sooner it gets sorted, the better for everyone, because then we can say, okay, now we can have a normal conversation about race, and that's fine. Yeah. And we can have minorities who are welcome, and we can also say,
they behave in a way that prioritizes the British way of living, right?
And as long as they're removed instantly as soon as they do certain things, and that certain things does not have to extend to violent crime. It can be things like marry their cousins if we want it to. We have no parliament can bind us. So we can do that if we want. And the problem is that if you do the Margaret Brennan thing, and that anyone who says this, you go, ooh, then you're just kicking that argument down the road, and more people will radicalize. And I kind of think automatically all homosexuals are just a bit allergic to radicalization, because, do you know what I mean? Because you kind of know that you're an outlier and you'll always be an outlier. So I want space for a minority and an acceptance of a majority.
Yeah. I mean, as kind of a liberal by constitution, like open kind of high in openness, high in creativity, stuff like that, I am kind of an outlier. And so I know that I need to keep the majority happy and to serve them, to use my particular skills to serve the majority, so that I don't have to be forced into a very rigid way of thinking. Like a Christian nationalism that has room, like a spacious Christian nationalism, I'm okay with, because I want the country to reflect Christian values. They're really good for the country. This is how the country was founded. But a rigid top-down authoritarian Christian is going to be grotesquely, I don't know. I grew up in California in the 90s. There was this really strong conservative Christian thing that worked really well, but it really squashed down a lot of creativity, and so a lot of people fled it, and then became allergic to it, and then the whole new atheist movement came in and destroyed it. And then we get woke progressivism, which is completely off the rails, which is the same thing. So I want some level of Christian America. I want that. And it doesn't need to be really strong, but it needs to be nurtured and challenged and held in tension with this other view of the world, which is more techno-optimistic, or, a little bit more playful. But at the same time, I kind of want polycules to be outlawed, But at the same time, I don't want anybody telling anybody else what to do in their bedroom. But they should be... The education system should teach that behavior is disgusting, just for the health of society.
Yeah, well, without
and people who violate those norms just have to deal with the shame. Like, I shouldn't have to I shouldn't have to give up the social modulation of shame so that people don't have to be uncomfortable with the bad decisions that they make. If they live a disgusting life, they should live with a certain amount of shame, because that provides pressure on society to keep it going in a certain direction, which I could hear you being allergic to as a homosexual, right? Because that shame that you bore, or that homosexuals bore in my youth, led to probably excesses, excesses and unhealthy living. That's just not necessarily healthy for them. But at the same time, when you lift that up, then it's Pandora's box. So I don't know. It's a
maybe, but I do think not everything is choice, and things land. I mean, you could talk about single motherhood as this. You can't look at every single mother and say, "Oh, you've made some kind of cultural decision or tribal decision."
Yeah.
That's like a really wonky way to do it. So what do you want to do? Do you want to have a society where I don't want that to be regulated by shame, but I also don't want people to say it doesn't matter whether you have a father, because that's awful. That's a terrible thing to say and very destructive. So I think you're just walking across that line. And I think that this is the thing about liberalism, is that a conservative would then perceive that, because it's a tightrope walk, would perceive that as liberalism because it's precarious and could fall apart at any minute. But a liberal is going to already have decided I'm a fascist. So that maybe that's a sign that there's some...
I was listening to a Jordan Peterson talk with a woman who is for children's rights. I can't remember her name, but I was kind of surprised. She went really hard against surrogacy, gay surrogacy. And she called out Dave Rubin by name, who's a friend of Jordan Peterson.
It wasn't Jennifer Lowell, was it?
No, it wasn't Lowell. It was another woman. I'll have to look it up and put it in the show notes. But she called out Dave Rubin and said, you deprived these two children of two mothers. You deprived them of their mothers. And that is a crime against these children. The children had no choice in this matter, right? And surrogacy is another line. It's like that slippery slope. It's like, okay, well, we accepted gay marriage. Now we should be able to accept gay children. Or I mean, surrogacy.
Here's the slippery slope. You're talking about the slippery slope where it starts and it says, let us get married and then bake our cake and whatever. And at the end of it is trans the kids, right? That's your slippery slope.
Okay, yeah. I'm bringing that up partially because it's a very tempting argument, but I want to hear resistance to that.
Well, okay, the resistance is, why have you started your slippery slope in the middle? Because the beginning of the slippery slope was don't kill us. And then it was, when we were in jail, don't castrate us. If you're talking about gay rights, it was don't kill us.
Okay, yeah. So,
do you see what I mean? So an honest person who was very, very far to the right would say, no, he's absolutely correct. The slippery slope started with don't kill us, and that's where we went wrong. And to an extent, like
wow.
You know, we could do the whole of that slippery slope. It was don't kill us. When we're in jail, don't castrate us. Don't put us in jail. If we're killed, actually investigate it. Don't pretend to lose the paperwork, so we're a free hit, because that's happened to gay men. Don't sack us. Don't force us to live alone if we want to live with other. So, okay, so I have a bit of an issue with the slippery slope thing.
Yeah.
Because I think you could pick wherever, and in a sense, probably you'll get more honesty out of the people who were really to the right and would be like, yes, we should have killed them. I think I genuinely on this, I kind of would say parenthood is different. But I can hear you saying, okay, so now you're making the Doyle argument of children are special, but everything else is fine. But I do think surrogacy, it's, I mean, for a start, it really matters whether we're talking about things like trans and surrogacy, which we couldn't do technologically until very, very recently. Whereas homosexuality is not the same thing. And it's not something which has been facilitated by modern technology, notwithstanding Grindr or Tinder. I can never remember which one is the gay one and which one's the straight one. I can't remember. Grindr sounds like it should be gay.
Yeah, it's very yeah. The technology kind of throws out acceptance. It complicates the waters so much. Like don't kill us. Equal rights. Okay, like once we get equal rights, the marriage thing is kind of like that for me. The marriage thing. Like, I still have questions about that. So
you're just picking a point on a slope, then?
Am I?
So you sort of admit that you tell me, because it kind of sounds like you are, because you're saying, I agree with the not killing, I agree with but this is where my point... So maybe we all have to do that, and maybe that's fair enough.
It might be. Well, I think the marriage thing it's a part of society enshrining that relationship on par with a heterosexual relationship. And it's a different type of relationship, and it should be treated differently. But at the same time, if we're talking about a materialistic, from a materialistic point of view, people should be able to make decisions and partnership, like a business partnership. There should be no difference between a male and a male business partnership and a male and a female business partnership. But the fact that the heterosexual relationship includes the continuation of the propagation of the species and the creation of human beings in its incubacy puts it at a higher level of importance, and should be enshrined differently and considered and respected, and even not worshipped, but adulated on another level as something that's sacred, because that is the fount of humanity from that relationship. I mean, but we're talking in idealistic terms that don't really translate to our materialistic moment. I'm talking in kind of mystical, spiritual values. And so just using the word, that's why I had a reaction to gay marriage when it became a part. Well, it was also like, it was made an issue by Karl Rove in the 2003-2004 presidential election to get Bush out of office. We had to shoehorn in this gay marriage, which was a cultural issue. It was really shoehorned in. And I had a reaction to it. I'm like, marriage is a special term. Now, partnership or something like a legal agreement, that's a different thing. But marriage is a certain thing that can't be replicated outside of a man and a woman. It just can't be replicated, and that's my Christian milquetoast.
So but this was tried through this argument ran through in the UK, and what happened is they decided precisely that, and they introduced something called civil partnership. And before you know it, you had sisters saying, we want to be civil partnered, because civil partnership gave you certain rights of like property and next of kin
sisters
and stuff, but it wasn't cool. Yeah, so they introduced civil partnership for gay couples, and then it ended up being challenged by people, for example, two sisters living together who nothing incestuous. I'm not talking about that.
Nothing incestuous.
But wanted to protect their rights in law and kind of give one another next of kin and have all of. And so why shouldn't sisters be in civil partnerships with one another? Why can't you have three people in a civil partnership rather than two?
Yeah.
And before you know it, the whole town is in a civil partnership with everyone because it's a tax fraud.
Well, yeah, but if you look at whether or not your government deserves your taxes, then fair enough. Let's do it.
But you take my point. Look, I feel less strongly against what you say than I used to. I used to feel really quite strongly about it, and now I don't feel as strongly about it. What would have
changed, or what has changed in your point of view?
Oh, just time.
Yeah.
Just time. And meeting more and more people and stuff. But I would push back against it, because everything you say is lovely in a kind of very theoretical. And it's kind of like if we, and then you kind of look at the 80-year-old guy who's married the 22-year-old lady and think, okay, well, is this really some sacred, holy fount of human life, or is it just an old rich dude buying some boobs to look at? And do we want to tell him that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we can't. See, this is the thing. This is why I'm a liberal. Yeah. I can't really tell anybody what to do. I can't do that. I can make my appeals, which like fall flat nowadays, because we live in this.
You can say to people, I think this is a sham, but I think you should have a right to do it, which is a different idea.
So I'm kind of like that's my own slippery slope of bigotry. I'm like, well, I'm a bigot, but not enough to get in your face.
Yeah, but I think we're all like that, and I think that isn't that just quite normal? Because you can set up your ideal constructs and say this is the ideal, and you could be really, really hard line about that and start introducing all sorts of policies around the edges, and then you meet real life.
Yeah.
That kind of hits up against real life. So divorce is one of them. It's very easy, particularly when you're young, just kind of look at people and be like, I'd never get divorced. And then you meet somebody who's been divorced and you think, well, with a few exceptions, I'm sure they probably just didn't do it on a whim. Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't just do it because they were bored. They did it, sorry, I'm being...
I love the cat.
Yeah, he's quite keen on attention.
I'm a milk toast reactionary. That's why I like hanging out with the reactionaries, because they're allowed to be stronger than I am. I don't have the constitution to be as hardline as these guys.
I don't know. I suppose I'm probably to the left of you, which is not my usual experience, because most people I hang around with, I'm to the right of, or I
Well,
speak
yeah,
to,
because
I would be
you're
to the
in
right
posh
of.
company, and you're in like the failed state of the UK. So I mean, of course,
I don't live in
everybody.
the UK. I live in Ireland,
Well, don't tell them that, but they're
which
part of the UK
is.
basically. Other than
Oh,
like,
okay. You say that on a street corner here. I'll leave you to that.
whoa, okay, I'll say that to the 20-year-old Somalian that's haranguing, and see like they'd
It
be
isn't
more
for me to
offended by
criticise the
me.
Republic of Ireland. It's not for me to criticise the Republic of
I
Ireland.
know. Okay, yeah, I know.
But yeah, I take your point. I suppose I'm used to having all of my arguments more tested from like there's something wrong with you because you're too conservative point of view, and I don't live up to those tests because, as we've discussed, the answer to that is there isn't really an answer to that other than to say I'm just not afraid of saying I don't think that you should be able to do certain things, which is where there would be a point of contention between me and most people. So maybe I just kind of default to, well, you should be able to do certain things without kind of thinking about how to justify that. But that doesn't necessarily bother me because I don't think that we're all in a particular moment. There's no point trying to find some perfect political system. That's not going to work.
You just
It's different
you
for
need to
all.
gather the cojones to take out certain things. Draw a line in the sand, say 1997 to 2010, but actually it should be 1961. But we're going to go for 97.
That's what we have to do right now. Yeah, not faff around trying to find some perfect system, which is probably a cultural difference because if you're British, you have everything's inherited. Nobody designed the British political system. It just
Yeah.
grew in the way it is.
Yeah.
So you can't go back to
But
some
without the British
foundational
character,
blueprint.
but without the British character, that doesn't
Exist.
with the dilution of British character.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Like
But it doesn't. It's
doesn't
not
even-
written down for a start.
Yeah.
It's not a written constitution, so you have to have some kind of honor code or something to keep it going, which is why it's so in danger.
Well, but that's also the argument against the Constitution. It has no power. People just like agree to play along with it, and so far as like they do, it does have some staying power. But it's like just because it's written doesn't mean it's any more set in stone or less set in stone than you're inherited. It's just it's more delineated.
Well, it allows people to have lots of long, complicated arguments as well, which most people enjoy. Well, it's true. Whereas in the British system, it's more frightening. There's an argument that the British system is more frightening because you can do anything. There's not really anything to stop a prime minister going mad and doing whatever.
Ah, man. But there is something to stop King Charles from dissolving Parliament and doing a reboot.
Well, yeah, but my understanding is basically comes down to the same thing as honor. I think I'm right in saying he has the right to dismiss the prime minister tonight and say, I want my butler to be prime minister. But he has the right. He's not going to.
Yeah.
And that's something that if you say that to a German, they'll look at you like you're insane. If you say to a German, yeah, we haven't had that written down, but it's kind of just a custom and practice that there are some things that you can't do, but we haven't written it down. They'll look at you like you're mad, like genuinely mad. It's this famous thing that there's no phrasal verb for to wing it in German. If you try and explain winging it, and they're like, oh, you mean to do something without the requisite pre-organization? Oh, to fail. This is what this means. Oh, I see, to wing it, to fail. Like they don't, you know what I mean?
Maybe that's why my right-wing playlist, right-winging it, isn't done that good in Germany, because they just have no concept for my wordplay.
No, they don't know what winging it is. They don't know what it is at all. You can't explain it to them at all. It's a completely foreign concept.
You know, people ask about how you're doing. Yeah, Eliza Mondegreens. She's reached out several times. People have reached
Oh,
out.
how I'm doing, or how
Yeah,
how are you doing in the Joey
you are
Tribbiani
doing,
sense?
how you were doing, because
Okay.
I mean, everybody knew that you had health complications, to put it mildly, and then you kind of went off the map for a while. You stopped traipsing around the
Yeah.
gender corridors and stuff like that, and then you released good news about 2-3 weeks ago or whatever, that you're in the clear.
Well,
You have
I'm in the clear as
med.
much as anyone who was in my situation could be in the
Yeah,
clear.
yeah,
It's very difficult to describe the intensity of what I went through. It was a very wild experience.
yeah. And you're alive.
Yeah. Like I say, this conversation I had with this old friend of mine who was nearly killed, and like it was so weird because we just kept on pausing and I'd just say two words and she'd finish the sentence. Like we had this, this kind of connection now that, and it. I don't want to talk about what it does to people because I don't know what it does to people. I don't know that there is an it, but I can say that the experience I went through really forces you to sharpen your mind and think about what you can bear and divest the rest. When I did the first interview on camera with you, there was a guy, I do read the comments sometimes, and there was a guy who left a brilliant comment. If you're watching this, well done. It was really useful. He said, you need to be quite selfish. You need to be really selfish. And that's true. You can't have, if there's something which is just too much, if you're in a situation where there's a roughly slightly under 10% chance that you'll survive, you can't, that's it. I'm sort of topped out. I'm full. I can't take on other people's stuff. You just can't do it. So I withdrew, partly because of that, partly because of, partly because, who was it you interviewed? Is it Travis
Brown?
Trevor? The
Filmmaker did he's doing a series on gender. I can't recall. I'm really bad with names.
Yeah, well, you were sort of talking about how you get a lot of abuse if you talk about all of this kind of stuff, and it was partly to reduce that as well.
Strong characters in the gender domain. I don't know how they're doing. I noped out after Dressgate. I'm like, oh, this is ridiculous. I have other things. I'm a stepdad now. I'm a step-grandpa. I have to... I don't want to spend my energy being yelled at by women on the internet. Like, I have one woman, and she's the only one that's going to yell at me now.
I had what everyone gets, which is, but you get your own flavor of it, which is when I deleted all of my social media.
Yeah.
Because I just thought, yeah. It was an anonymous email. It said, if you didn't want cancer, you shouldn't have taken it up the ass. And all faggots deserve cancer because all faggots hate females. And I think I know who that is. I think it's a gentleman who's gone a bit mad recently. I don't want to say anything more about that, but I think I know who it is.
Okay.
I might tell you off camera. I don't think it would be in anyone's interest to talk about it.
Okay.
And I kind of looked at it.
Just to be clear, it's not Milo Yiannopoulos. Not him. So
No. It was just that. It was those two lines. It was if you
then that
shouldn't
affected
take it up the arse, and it did. And then I kind of decided.
Why would that affect?
Clearly, not everyone gets affected by these things, and clearly I am, and so I just need to kind of give the world some very clear signals that I'm really not available for this kind of thing right now.
Yeah,
because I'm living 3 months to 3 months, and every 3 months there's a serious chance somebody could say, "That's it. You've not got that much longer," and I actually can't. I can't have an email account where things might come into it like that. I don't need it. And in a way,
it really
a really
shocks
good way to
you
look
how
at it
hateful when people are being hateful. That's something I recall from our ongoing conversations. Like, you are shocked when people send you like hate, like that. It touches.
I'm shocked at it because I just don't really see what it's supposed. Well, I suppose I know what it's supposed to achieve, which is it's supposed to make you react, which is why I just kind of thought, okay, well, my reaction is going to be the counter to what I imagine is hoped. And what I imagine is hoped is, I don't know, presumably to respond to it or something like
or
this.
Cry. I don't know.
But I've had other stuff like that before. Like not much, 2 or 3, but it's like really nasty, like kill all the gays stuff. And that didn't affect me. That was just when I was working. And I just deleted it and I didn't think anything of it. But there was something about it at this time where I was just thought, okay, for a start, this was like a year after I'd done or said anything. So it had this quite creepy, like, why are you following me? This isn't like, I haven't done something recently.
Okay, yeah, it clicked.
Yeah, I think this is somebody. Well, I think that whoever it was, it's clearly somebody quite unwell. Because if you want that sort of, and that was what disturbed me about it, particularly because I've had stuff like that before and not spoken about it or told anyone about it. I do find it quite depressing. But in this case, I started to just think, I have said nothing about this issue for a year. I haven't made any money in 2 years, 3 years from it. I haven't written anything about it. I'm not getting anything from this. Why do I have a social media account that's essentially full of bait for weirdos when I could just not? And I saw a tweet from Louise Perry who just said, very airily in her way, Louise Perry, she said in her lovely way, I just delete everything every 2 months. And I thought, yeah, why don't I do that? Why have I got this as this magnet for people with personality disorders? Because at the time when I was working and I got like kill all the faggots or whatever it was, you just think, well, okay, I don't really have time to stew over it and I'm not going to delete my email account. Whereas now I was like, well, I can delete anything I like. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but you didn't get deleted. So, in a matter of speaking, kind of harshly, you're still alive. So now you slowly accrue back responsibility to your fellow man. You slowly accrue, like on a very basic level, you say, I have to get a job, but that just means I have to interact with the world. I have to serve people in one shape or another.
Yeah, I completely divested. There were a few months where I really did nothing, that would do very little beyond interacting with Mark, to be honest, and sort of, I don't know, 3 or 4 friends. Yeah. I'm quite a quiet person anyway. It's not like I would normally. This is a lot of what I did in 2020 was COVID madness. It really was COVID, like a lot of people. Like I got probably like 150 people in a year or something, and that would be, to meet and to know well, and that's not really me. So I'm probably re-stabilizing a bit.
It's weird.
Yes, I do, but I do have to re-engage. But I don't have to re-engage with that.
No,
and I don't have to re-engage with that topic. And if I do re-engage with that topic, I don't have to re-engage in such a way that would involve getting abuse from whatever quarter. But having said that, I'm not sure you can engage with this topic without getting that kind of abuse. No. I'm sure you've had as bad, if not worse.
No, not for some reason. No.
Do you just not read it?
Well, I don't take it up the butt, so that's off the table.
Neither do I, as it happens. That's the thing. You're supposed to. Presumably, it's supposed to sort of. You're supposed to go out there and start explaining the difference between anal cancer and rectal cancer. I don't know. But I don't. The point is, I don't have to engage with those. I saw your interview with Andrew Doyle about it, and you kind of said, like, just ignore it, and laughed. And he went, yeah, I suppose I should. Ha ha ha. And I kind of wanted to slap the pair of you in the nicest way possible, because I thought, no, stand up for decency. Like, that we shouldn't accept this. But then on the other hand,
can you say that in your Keir Starmer voice?
Stand up for decency. His beautiful voice. It's lovely, his voice. It's like honey. But I do think, what was I going to say?
You got to stand up.
Yeah, I think you are right, but part of me wants to say no. We should always talk about these things, and we should fight back. And then part of me thinks we're going to have to get used to the internet, and people with personality disorders have the access to the internet, and that's just it. So it's like all of the weirdos in town can come to this door.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, knock right on your gate. Yeah.
Yeah, but I did. I think I deleted myself from a bunch of stuff. I untagged myself from a bunch of stuff because I was just looking at it thinking, minimize.
Yeah.
This kind of interaction.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'd go back into anything which involved that kind of interaction.
With that, yeah. It just, you made me think that I know you in a certain way. You said that you said of yourself that you're a very like solitary person. And I don't know you that way at all, because all we've ever done is interact. So I just project this very gregarious, talkative personality onto you. When for me,
no, I'm not.
I don't like talking. I talk as little as possible, and like part of my marriage is like learning how to communicate better and learning how to be more open, and kind of explaining myself, not being so laconic, But like I'm sure people like just watch my channel and they have this vision of me of somebody who's just this great listener who really cares about everybody, And I'm like, usually just leave me alone. I'm in my own head.
Yeah, there's a thing that a lot of apparently comedians get asked why they look so miserable in restaurants, and it's because everyone's used to comedians. They're used to like, and actually they just have resting normal face.
Yeah.
So probably a lot of people think that I'm really, I don't know, outgoing and gregarious. And I think it's weird as well because there's obviously, like, let's just say the truth. There's obviously something about the gender issue which draws narcissists. Like that's quite clear, I think.
Yeah. Including
don't you?
Present company.
Oh no, we're both perfect.
Okay.
No, I'm being quite serious though. Sorry, that was facetious. It does have. No, I'm not saying everyone in it's a narcissist, and I don't think you're a narcissist. I don't think I'm a narcissist, and that's the point I was going to make. I've learned something about myself, which I'm not narcissistic at all. And it's a field where there are lots of people who really want to be the center of attention the whole time, and I don't, as you know, because you've. There have been various points where you've been like, "Can I come on? Do you want to come on my show?" And I've said, "Not yet." And there's probably a lot of people out there who would immediately jump all over it, and I think there's something in that if you're working in an area where there's a lot of desire to be seen by certain people, maybe it's not the gender thing, maybe it's an internet thing. I don't know, whatever. But I'm not really like that, so people might have, layered all sorts of things on top of me. I'm fine not being the center of attention. It's grand. Yeah. Yeah. Which is, I think, like you're quite happy to sit at the edge and watch something interesting going on. You don't feel like pangs of jealousy that you're not the center of the world.
Oh, no. Every once in a while, some upstart starts interviewing people, has better production values, and gets hundreds of thousands of views, and I piddle along with 5,000, 6,000. I'm like, oh, you took my wheelhouse and made it mainstream, but I guess I didn't want
to. You see, I wouldn't care about any of that kind of stuff when it comes to the work I did on gender, but I would care about it with the linguistics. I'd care about it very deeply with linguistics. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't impress me at all. Somebody came along and sort of like the stuff I'm working on, and turned out, which is always your worst nightmare if you're coming up with a thesis, is that somebody else will come up with it at the same time and publish it, and then you're screwed. Yeah. And if they did it better, like that's not going to go down well with me. But seeing people on screen or seeing people on a stage and getting some pang of jealousy, and I do think that there's quite a lot of drama which has started because there's only so much limelight.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Not big into drama, no. Alasdair Gunn, we should wrap up the conversation.
It's lovely to talk to you.
It was absolutely excellent to talk to you. I'm going to do an intro to the fact that this is an ongoing conversation, so people are going to tune in for you and then get delivered a whole bunch of soft reactionaryism from both of us. So it's fun to dip into
Pudgy reactionism.
Pudgy reaction.
Pudgy fascist, pudgy middle-aged, not really asked about
Aren't we the
it,
bad guys?
fascism.
Oh, I kind of want to be the bad guy. Can I be a bad guy? Or whatever that skit is. Whatever those guys are.
You need to do that in Keir Starmer. Can you do a Keir Starmer voice?
I don't know. I can't do a Keir Starmer. No, I can't do it.
Oh, you're missing everything.
I can try to do a Michael Caine, but I probably shouldn't try to do that on
Yeah, you probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
No, you probably shouldn't.
Alasdair, can people reach you, or that you just want them to leave you alone?
I am not accessible to people by default.
You don't have like a
However,
Substack?
No, not yet. And I kind of feel like that would be I want to do some work. But people can leave messages under anything that I post, and like people are very welcome to. It's just I'm not engaged in anything.
Yeah,
so.
You're not engaged. But yeah, so that's just the habitual closing question. Where can people find you? They can't. Well, they could if they looked on Twitter, but
behind veils.
Excellent. Going to end the recording. Thank you very much. Love you, man.
Thank you very much. Love you back.
Boom.
I'm going for a piece of chewing gum.
Okay. There we go. Cool.